All right. Welcome back to the first post-game pod of the 2025 NFL season for the Behind the Back podcast. I am your host, Marcos Conan Negrón, coming to you live, coming off of a 24-20 win against the Dallas Cowboys on opening night. Philadelphia Eagles, it was a close one, and there's a lot to digest from this game. This game also featured an hour weather delay because there was lightning in the area in Philadelphia. So it really did feel like a tale of two games. So I kind of want to, when talking about this post game, I kind of just want to talk about it in the two parts. So when the game started, it kicks off. And on the very first play on the kickoff, Ben Van Sumeren, who was the fullback, who was a linebacker converted fullback for the Eagles this offseason, goes down with a leg injury and he can't get up. When they were panning the camera to him, he was saying, "This sucks. This is effed." Like, he was in disbelief that it was happening to him again after suffering a major injury last year. So that was a bummer. But at the same time that this was happening, all of a sudden there's the camera pans to Jalen Carter and Dak Prescott. And it shows Jalen Carter spitting on Dak Prescott and getting ejected. And in that moment, everyone's freaking out. The broadcast, the fans, like the fact that when they did the slow motion and they showed him spitting on him, they're like, "Oh crap, why would he do that? That's so, that was so immature, unnecessary," and you get tossed for that. And that was such a killer. I think Jalen Carter has these moments where he's so dominant as a player, but he's still a young man, and he's still immature, and he still has these moments where you're like, even if it's justified, because when that's the first thing we see was him spitting, we don't know any more information at this point in time in the game. We're like, what is Jalen Carter doing? The whole game plan just changed. And we saw that on the opening possession where the Dallas Cowboys just came out there, started running the ball down our throats, and they were able to exploit our cornerback too, Adoree Jackson, who had an awful game, but they were able to march right down the field and score. And all anyone could talk about was, "Oh my gosh, the Jalen Carter thing. It's swishing everything up." And this also was a game that we didn't have our rookie defensive tackle Ty Robinson or edge rusher Azeez Ojulari in the lineup in this one. So this was also like a game where our depth was really tested because our best player, it wasn't, available right before the game, like as the game's happening, before the first snap. So this was unacceptable. I think, listen, the Eagles won. It cures it in that sense, but like there's a chance that he could be suspended. And I think that, now let's add the context. Let's add the full story now that we that's how it started, right? So that's how the game started, was with Jalen Carter getting ejected and us not knowing much more info. After halftime, they figured out, they got more angles, right? And it did originate from Dak Prescott spitting in the direction of Jalen Carter. So I guess what had happened now that this is post-game and some interviews have come out, talked to Jalen Carter and talked to Dak Prescott. Dak said that he was talking that Jalen Carter was having words with rookie guard Tyler Booker on Dallas, and Dak Prescott just kind of spat in the direction, right? And Jalen Carter's like, "Oh, you're spitting at me?" And Dak was like, "Why would I spit at you?" And then Jalen Carter spits at him, and that's what started this whole thing. And Dak Prescott said after the game that he felt, I think the word he used was it almost feels disrespectful that Carter would assume that Dak Prescott would spit in his direction. So this led to and again, this is about something that Jalen Carter could totally control. And that's the part that he's always kind of had this issue with since being here in Philadelphia. He is a character. He's a guy who stands on his business. Like, if he feels like he wants, like, "Hey, I'm here to defend my team and my honor and my teammates and all that," like, I can respect that. But he always finds a way to make it more than it has to be. That's like an Ndamukong Suh, those kind of moments where you're like, "Dang, dude, like, you're so talented. And you don't need to be doing this to yourself and the team and the city. This team relies on you." We saw the very clear difference in the game in the defensive front without Jalen Carter. And it was a huge, detriment to the Eagles that they had to kind of fight through early on in this game. And fortunately, the offense showed up. And this was the part where, I think this was a great test for those who wanted to see how Jalen would handle, being behind and facing this adversity, having to deal with, the Jalen Carter and his antics on one side and the defense suffering because of it. And now Jalen really does have to step up if this is how the Cowboys offense was going to continue the rest of the game. And for the first half, it really was back and forth by both parties. The Eagles entered halftime. I believe it was a 20-17 lead at the time. It was a close game, 17-20. But the Eagles defense was finally at that point, by the end of the half, the Eagles defense was starting to make plays, get the ball, and slow down that Cowboys offense. So the Eagles were able to enter halftime with the lead, get the ball back. And what was really, good, and I'll break down more of the first half, but it led to midway, 4:44 left in the third quarter, then it led to this weather delay. And again, the first half of this game, up until that weather delay, that offenses for both sides of the ball were just moving up and down the field. The Eagles were having a really hard time when they were able to generate pressure on Dak. Dak was just able to find Dory Jackson, Dory Jackson was guarding, or Jacorian Bennett. The Eagles were so sloppy in the first half with penalties. I believe they had 7 penalties in the first half. It was either 6 or 7, and it was for like 90 yards. And half of the reason is part of the reason Dallas was moving the ball towards the end of that second quarter was because of the penalties. It was basically a whole drive based off of penalties, off of 2 back-to-back defensive pass interference. You get a roughing the passer penalty, you get taunting penalties, just uncharacteristic things that I get it, guys. Play with the edge. You are the champions. You got the target on your back. Play with your edge, but you got to play smart. These are the things that led you to be a Super Bowl champion, was the fact that you guys were the more controlled team. You were the team committing less mistakes, not just turnovers, but penalties. And I talked about this going into the game, but that was going to be that's what I was confident that the Eagles would be okay with, was the penalties and stuff. And all these penalties came on the defensive side of the ball. None of this happened on the offense. So there's a lot of work to do, but on a positive side, there was some good moments. Like Drew Makuba, and Jahad Campbell flashed in their first game together. They were out there making plays. Jahad Campbell had a nice pass breakup later in the game. And Josh Uche, our edge rusher that we got in the offseason, he sliced in there a couple times and was able to generate pressure on a few of those plays on Dak and really muddy up the picture. And I thought he had a really good game. Jalix Hunt got into it in the second half. The second half was all defense for both teams. The offense is, I think it was an hour break. So basically with that break right after halftime, it was hard for these offenses to get going. And that was the tale. So when we talk about this, so up until the break, and I'm pulling this from NFL Plus on Twitter here, before the delay, both teams, the Eagles and the Cowboys, combined for 44 points, 488 total yards on 6.2 yards of play, and no punts. And then 4:44 left in the third quarter, they start the game again. No points are scored after this. Going into the delay, it was 24-20, and that's how the game stayed, with 123 total yards, 3 yards of play, and 5 punts. So the extended break really did get in the way of, I think, just the game in general, the momentum. Any momentum that either team had, it was bad. Like Landon Dickerson went down after the break, and the Saquon couldn't get going. They really did a good job trying to sell out to stop the run, and they were generating pressure on Jalen in the second half of this game to really kind of force him off of his path. But that doesn't take away from the fact that Jalen Hurts actually had an amazing game. He finished 19-23, 152 yards. He had 62 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns through the ground. And the Cowboys had really good coverage on our receivers, and they were breaking down the pocket. They were doing a good job. Jalen had time in the pocket. I just think there were moments where his guys recovered and he made that decision to go quick. He picked up, I believe, a career-high 5 first downs with his legs, and he also had, obviously, the 2 touchdowns, too. It just looks like, as usual, whenever we needed a big play in this game, it was Jalen Hurts. And the second half, again, just wasn't a lot of offense. I think both teams were really just trying to get the knockout punch. Jalen did have a 51-yard bomb to Jahan Dotson. That really gave them a chance there. I think it was to put them up. I forget if it was to tie it up 14 or to go up after that. But I just think that Jalen Hurts was consistent. He looked in control, and I thought the offense looked pretty well. Listen, A.J. Brown, had one catch for 8 yards, and arguably the most important catch. It was on the last 2 minutes. It gave him a chance to get that last first down that Jalen got with his legs with 1:45 left. That sealed the deal. So it was like he went to AJ when it mattered most, right? But yeah, he was non-existent today. Devontae Smith had a couple catches. They had a couple screens today that was like, whoa, hey, they ran some pretty good screens, the Eagles did. So I think the Eagles offense was very much in preseason mode. I think Dallas, Jalen was, if he was going to Saquon and Goddard, those were kind of the guys he was really hunting. Those were the kind of guys who were in the pockets that he could kind of bail out to, and they were making plays. I think that overall, when we look at Saquon, he finishes the day. Let me pull up the right stats here. He finishes 18 carries, 60 yards. He did get a touchdown, but he also had 4 catches for 24 yards. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but Saquon made a bunch of good plays in this game by extending the drives, extending plays. That's what Saquon does best. Devontae Smith, 3 catches, 16 yards. Will Shipley had 3 rushes for 26 yards. And then he was not featured in the game, so I think he went down. So we'll see what developments happen with him and Landon Dickerson. And I know Jalen got threw around a bunch in this game, and I know Jordan Mailata, he didn't seem to be 100% in this game either. So we'll hear more about the injury reports that come out, but fortunately the Eagles have an extended rest before the Cowboys. So again, this offense up until the rest was doing just fine, and I think that this was a positive development. The fact that they were still able to move the ball, still able to pick up first downs at will, basically. They picked up 20, Dallas had 22. So both teams were really picking up first downs in this one. There was only 1 sack in this game in general, and that was the Cowboys sacking Jalen Hurts late in this game. The Eagles had 9 penalties for 110 yards, guys. Got lucky. There's a lot of things here that the Eagles should have won this game by 2 touchdowns, but they also got away with some stuff. CeeDee Lamb, who people love to say is better than A.J. Brown, had 3 crucial drops in this game, right off the hands. And listen, all of those drops were basically tip drills too that could have turned into interceptions too. So they got really lucky. The Cowboys did, and CeeDee Lamb did. Obviously, they lost the game because of some of those drops, but the Eagles had missed opportunities too, and the Eagles were, again, turnovers. They were sloppy. This isn't the kind of brand, if we're going to take this into Kansas City, we're going to be in for a rude awakening if we're not playing efficiently. So this is going to be one of the things to monitor, but this is how it goes, right? It's September for the Eagles. They didn't play preseason. They're going to be rusty. They look good. I think the offense was a positive, and the defense picked it up at the end. They were playing physical, and again, it was just the penalties that really got in the way. They helped Dallas extend drives via penalties, and every time they made a good play, it just seemed to get taken away. And then when it looked like the pressure was getting to Dak, CeeDee Lamb's just wide open. And that was it just felt like a little bit, it just felt weird because, again, overall, when we look at the Cowboys, right, Dak Prescott, 21-34, 188 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. It was a fine game. He was doing a good job. He was moving the ball up and down the field. Javonte Williams had 15 carries, 54 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And that was the beginning of the game where the Eagles were really trying to figure out what to do on defense when they found out Jalen Carter wasn't going to be playing the rest of the game, right? So that was happening at that time in the first half. Miles Sanders broke off a big run, and Zach Bond tried to peanut punch it out and force a fumble. But then on the ensuing play, a couple plays, I think a penalty happened before this, the Eagles made a big play in the end zone on 3rd down. Reed Blankenship gets called for an unnecessary roughness penalty for hitting a defenseless receiver. And then we're like, oh man, the momentum goes back to Dallas, and then Miles Sanders fumbles and forced by I think they said it was Byron Young, our defensive tackle, but Jahad Campbell was the one holding and had the hand on the ball, and I think Byron Young, forced fumble. Jahad Campbell was in on that play, so I was really excited to see that. And Quinyon Mitchell gets the forced fumble, the fumble recovery, and the Eagles take the ball. And that was the last play before the stoppage. And then it really just went into a defensive showdown. And again, towards these last couple drives, there was missed opportunities. Quinyon Mitchell had a dropped interception on that last drive before CeeDee dropped the ball. And that could have been game, right? So it's just those little moments where you're like, man, dude, if Jalen Carter was here, how would the defense look? If we just had a few of those tip drill balls, we had 4 interceptions. It really felt that way. But the Eagles were able to make plays when it matters, and that's what you have to do right? That's the whole point. The Eagles played. If I had to say, like, if I had to give them a grade, I'm giving them like a C. It really wasn't a good game. The offense did a great job. Jalen, like Ben called at the beginning, he was definitely the MVP of this game in terms of just his impact, and the Cowboys just didn't have an answer for him. And when they finally kind of did and mixed up the pressures on him, Jalen did figure it out and was able to extend drives still. So I think that, like, the Eagles played all right, and I am a little, is Jalen Carter going to get suspended now that we know more information? What the NFL is going to do? Is it just going to be a fine, or are they going to keep him out? I am a little bit worried about what this team looks like long term if Jalen Carter is to miss an extended period of time. And I just think that, again, this whole game, the talking point, I know this is going to be that's going to be the talking point in the media tomorrow, is going to be Jalen Carter, like, irresponsible. Can you win with this guy, even though they already won a Super Bowl with him? I just, like, it was a dumb moment. It's unacceptable. He should get punished for it because, dude, you got to be a leader. Like, you're supposed to be taking that place of the guy who leads this defense into the future of the new look. You, Quinyon Cooper, like, you have everything going for you, and you are the heart and soul of that defense. And that is the main takeaway, is the fact that this was under his control. And the fact that he chose to do that, it sucks. And, it seems that when Jalen talks about it, he's like, it sucks because I want to play for my team. I want to play for my guys. I miss being out there. And he was trying to offer up what he saw to the defensive lineman at halftime. Like, he was trying to be a part of it. But if you're really going to be a part of it, dude, your impact is on the field. Your impact is facing off against the guys and taking double teams, so Moro Ojima doesn't have to do it, or Jordan Davis doesn't have to do it. And the D-line was able to generate some pressure. Right? They just had missed opportunities. Jordan Davis missed a sack. Like, Jalen Hunt, like, had an opportunities to. Uche got in there and forced some pressures, and I think he was able to muddy it up. So it wasn't a complete disaster without him. But if it is a picture of, like, let's say Carter gets hurt and he misses extended time, like, we are a little bit worried about the long-term shape of the defense. But overall, when we talk about this game, I think it was a good preseason week one, for the starting guys to really get things going. This was a gritty game. This was a game that, tested the defense and it tested the offense. Had to make big plays down the stretch. Both sides did, and they did. So again, that's that championship DNA. You keep winning. Jalen Hurts is 5-0 in opening day games. The Eagles have won 15 straight now in games in which Jalen Hurts starts and finishes the game and isn't knocked out midway through. So they're still churning. The Eagles team is still churning, and obviously still has questions. Now, I think if we talk about a little, what I'm looking for moving forward is that CB2 spot, that cornerback 2 spot. Adoree, man, you are on the hottest of seats. And he got taken in at the end of the second quarter for a concussion, and they said he was approved at halftime, like he was good to go. He went out there for a little bit, and they were mixing him and Jacorian Bennett in. They did finish the game with Adoree Jackson. But I thought that was interesting too. No Keely Ringo in this game. So I just wonder if the Eagles, this is a good offense in terms of the receivers you're playing. And you're going to be facing good offenses all year. So it's like, if teams really do feel like they can attack your cornerback too consistently, we saw how Dallas was really trying to pick on it. And it took a second for Fangio to adjust. And I think at the end there, they were able to generate pressure, and that kind of made it easier. And if that's going to be the recipe, it's easier to do something like that with Jalen Carter in the backfield, right? There to help you out. So I just think that there is still potential. The fact that we held them to 20 points, and again, I think a lot of the final outcome came from the break. I think that had this game kept going from where it was with 4:44 left in the game, I think we're talking about like a 38-35, 38-31 type of game. It was heading in that direction. So it's a shame that, the fans kind of had to wait a little bit, and then it was just kind of a clunker the rest of the way. Obviously, as an Eagles fan, you take the win, you start 1-0, schedule gets harder from here. Do you know who's going to be healthy? You get a mini bye going into a road game at Kansas City, where it's gonna be hotly contested. Kansas City plays tomorrow against the Chargers, so we'll see who ends up on top there, and we'll see what that travel. The Eagles had to do that last year, so yes, it's going to be a tough environment to go into in Kansas City, but the Eagles are also coming off of a mini bye of their own and don't have to travel across the country. So. That will be something to monitor for next week. MVP, Jalen Hurts. I know I already kind of gave Ben his flowers for mentioning that during the pod, but Jalen Hurts stepped up and made every play that we needed him to extend drives. He had the final first down. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, and it had big plays with his arm too. So I think that it was just an overall consistent game from QB1, and listen, he's not, he got 2 rushing touchdowns. He still scored. And Saquon gets a touchdown there too. It just goes to show that the Eagles, again, they win their way, and their way is possessing the ball, wearing down the clock, picking up first downs, and just getting downfield. Not to mention, shout out Jake Elliott too. He also hit a 58-yard field goal in this game that really kept momentum on our side. This was after, I think, the Jalen Hurts sack. They were able to get a few more yards, and then Jake Elliott made a huge kick, which is great for the vibes perspective, because last year he was 1 of 8 from 50-yard plus field goals until the playoffs, of course. But it's a great looking sign for Jake Elliott if that's how you start the season. So really, it's a C game. You get a win. That's all you can really ask for at this stage of the season. So we win the season opener at home. That's awesome. I'm really happy about that. So I think that's pretty much all, when we take away from this post game. You take the win. Hopefully the injuries don't come back too severe on some of these guys, and that you can just keep plugging and chugging for Kansas City week 2. So I think we're going to leave it off there, guys. But this was the Behind the Back pod post game, the first one for week 1 for the 2025 NFL season, Eagles versus Cowboys. You will get another post game pod on Monday morning following the Niners game versus the Seahawks. So stay tuned for that when you get there, and hopefully the Niners, Ben hosts a post game he's also sharing a positive result against a division rival. But this was the post game pod. I am Marcos Conan Negron. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on all of our social medias. The links to each are going to be down in the description below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, and follow the show. We appreciate all the love and support that we get from you guys each and every week. Another year of post game pods coming at you guys. We're really excited, and hey, I'm even more excited because my Eagles, my Birds are 1-0. That's how you want to start. Every season is 1-0. So this is a great way to go, picking up, defending this title. So we'll stay tuned for next week when the Eagles play the Chiefs, and we'll break that down. So stay tuned, guys. I love y'all. I will talk to you next week. Peace.